And I know, for example, in Thailand, 10 years ago, you would go to a small cafe, coffee shop, and they were playing original songs, Elton John, Michael Jackson. And then at some point I realized, uh, oh, it sounds like Elton John, but it's a cover. Someone else is singing. And then I've read the news that police started enforcing the treaties Thailand has signed, so they were checking what music are you playing. So you so these days they cannot play directly from a YouTube because it's a business establishment. They're earning money, therefore you cannot play this. So countries are enforcing um, the IP laws, and yet I think many people, um, and I hope we can, fix it with our students. They are not aware of of all the IP laws floating around us.
Yeah. This goes back to another point that what you said earlier made me think about. You talking about the power of these big corporations. There's also between countries. So a lot of those corporations are big American-owned corporations, right? Western corporations. And so there is this debate about when countries that are still developing economically, as they're trying to develop economically, should they have the right actually to use some of that intellectual property that otherwise people in some countries might not be able to afford? So if you're in Myanmar, should you actually be able to download a movie because you haven't got access or can't afford, to sign up to one of the expensive American streaming services? So there is this whole debate as well about how countries develop and the extent to which they should enforce some of these intellectual property laws. The United States gets angry when Thailand doesn't enforce some of those laws, but maybe from the Thai perspective, they're saying, well, we're a less rich country, allow us to develop.
But I remember I've seen, let's say, DVDs sold in Thailand, and they're quite cheaper than the ones in the US, but it only has Thai language and it's encoded only for the Thai region.
Sure.
So it was already applied before, but now we're in the digital era. You can download. So I think Netflix is cheaper in Thailand, but maybe it doesn't have all the options. If you're a Netflix user in the US.
Right.
Uh, but what are the penalties for ordinary citizens? I know that if you are a coffee shop owner and you're found illegally playing something from YouTube or from your thumb drive, could be like 2 million baht fine for a small business for violating the rights of some you know huge corporation. I think it's maybe not fair.
Yeah, and people are often going to feel that. I suppose part of the reason the coffee shop owner might be targeted more is because they're easier to find,
Yeah.
right? Whereas the person who's uploaded a million songs and put it on a website, we don't know where they are in the world, right?
Yeah.
They might disguising where they are and so on. So that's one of the issues that IP law is having to deal with is, as we said earlier, lots of IP law is national to begin with, and it's enforced nationally. Well, if you don't know where someone is,
Yeah.
how can you enforce it? You might go onto a website to watch a movie that you couldn't get access to anywhere else. You don't know and don't care whether that website is in Russia or Turkey or in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to you. But it does matter to the law in terms of enforcing them.
Just a second. Blowing into my data.
But I think we're going to see some of those attitudes changing as countries develop. So China is a really good example, right? Incredible growth of the Chinese economy over the past 40, 50 years as they've become a global economy. And so what that means is they've created a lot more IP. So 40 years ago, they might have felt, well, we had to use American IP, whether we pay for it or not, in order to develop. Now leading in electric cars, renewable technologies. They're there with artificial intelligence. They're going to want to protect that intellectual property that they've created as well. So that shifts for countries as they develop more of their intellectual property and understandably want to own it.
Yeah, but of course, they can protect it within China, where they have the jurisdiction. But what if some poorer country, let's say in Africa, Ghana, are violating their rights? What will they go to Ghana and enforce their IP?
So one of the things we talk about in the class, of course, are international agreements. So lots of international agreements about trade and so on. They will include some intellectual property that, in theory, countries around the world are signing up to enforcing these laws. Now, of course, we know in reality the levels of enforcement are going to vary, but in principle, that's why we make intellectual property so central to some of these trade agreements. And the tariff disputes we're having at the moment, actually, a lot of that, if you look at it in detail, that's about intellectual property. That's about the United States feeling that other countries are stealing their intellectual property, rightly or wrongly.
I've watched news piece where they were talking about China and the United States, and then some were accusing China of illegally producing copies of Viagra pills, and then the argument Chinese were saying, well, these ingredients existed in China for thousands of years, and we were the first to use it,
right.
And now you are patenting it in a pill, and so prohibiting us from producing our own medicine. So again, there's always counter-argument, because what I tell my students, it's not about some law, notions of law and philosophy. It all boils down to money, right? If it wasn't for money, who would care? Who published the movie, who copied the book? But I wrote the book, therefore I want to sell it.
Yeah, pharmaceutical drugs are a really good example of how actually sometimes we can be more flexible, right? So when there's an important new pharmaceutical drug, maybe it's been developed by some American company or some European company, but we know it can save lives in Africa. Sometimes that's given away for free, right? We know those people in a particular country can't afford to buy it, or the health service can't afford to buy it. We know it can save hundreds of thousands of lives, millions of lives maybe. We say, okay, the intellectual property, we're going to give that up for this country or for this time. Again, maybe we need to have that kind of flexibility in thinking about other types of intellectual property.
Textbooks,
anything that can improve people's lives, or even movies. We might say movies are trivial, they're unimportant, but they're not. They're part of storytelling, they're part of culture. So is music. Can we be a bit more flexible and find other ways to share those things? And it's not going to cost some of those rich corporations a lot of money.
Yeah, kind of like what they've done with DVDs. Okay, let's say, again, people in a poorer country want to watch that movie. Make it available in that language, encode it for that region, and reduce the price, right? So they won't have the need to go to some website in Russia and download it from their way. When they can go to the official website and watch it for fraction.
Yeah. There is an interesting point of view that says, well, if people are, whatever word you want to use, stealing, infringing, the legal word we use, some of this intellectual property, actually that tells us that there are maybe new business opportunities there. The classic example is Spotify. Right? When there was a lot of illegal downloading of music in the 90s, getting the internet, people were uploading the albums they had bought, other people were downloading them. Spotify realized, hold on a minute, this means people love music. They want to listen to music, right? So if we create a legal service that's easy to use, that's not too expensive, people are going to use it. And of course, that's become the biggest music streaming service in the world. So you could look at this and say, actually, that's telling us something good. But the way we organize our businesses, movie downloading, book sharing, whatever it is, haven't quite caught up with some of these technologies. That's an opportunity for some of our entrepreneurs to think about, well, is there a different kind of business I could grow here?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.